Russia on Wednesday said nuclear war cannot be won and must never be fought in a shift from Russian President Vladimir Putin's fiery comments in recent months that have raised fears of a nuclear war. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs said in a statement that Russia wished to reaffirm its commitment to preventing nuclear war and avoiding arms races in accordance with the pact between the US, United Kingdom, France, and China, which, along with Russia, make up the five nations with nuclear weapons and capabilities. We are strongly convinced that in the current complicated and turbulent situation caused by irresponsible and impudent actions aimed at undermining our national security, the most immediate task is to avoid any military clash of nuclear powers. The ministry statement reads: amid a series of humiliating setbacks and losses in Ukraine, Putin has repeatedly threatened to use nuclear weapons. When he ordered an invasion of Ukraine in late February, Putin raised the possibility of nuclear weaponization and days later put his nation's nuclear forces on high alert. The Russian leader escalated his threat in September when he boasted that Russia's arsenal was more modernized than the Western security alliance NATO. This is not a bluff, Putin added in a September speech. In another speech last month, however, Putin said Russia does not intend to use a nuclear weapon in Ukraine. Still, top Russian military officials have discussed under what circumstances they would use nuclear weapons. In Wednesday's statement, Russia's Ministry of Foreign Affairs said it would only use a nuclear weapon in response to an aggression involving the use of weapons of mass destruction or an aggression with the use of conventional weapons when the very existence of the state is in jeopardy. We urge other states of the nuclear five to demonstrate in practice their willingness to work on solving this top priority task, the ministry said, and to give up the dangerous attempts to infringe on vital interests of each other while balancing on the brink of a direct armed conflict and encouraging provocations with weapons of mass destruction, which can lead to catastrophic consequences. The US and Western allies have shunned Russia for its assault on Ukraine and have accused the nation of escalating tensions. A majority of the member countries of the United Nations have also condemned Russia's invasion of Ukraine and combative rhetoric against the Western world. So, a story came out. I didn't do a video on it, but there was a story that came out about how this is back in June of last year when this apparently happened, when Biden was giving aid to Zelensky and by extension Ukraine. Zelensky became upset because he didn't feel it was enough, and Biden's stance was that he wanted to support Ukraine but not give them enough to where it could be used as a form of escalation. And when Zelensky snapped at him, Biden said he was ungrateful and really put his foot down. And this is one other instance where he's going to have to toe that same type of line. So, Western and American media have portrayed Putin as this evil. I mean, I've even seen some comparisons to a certain chancellor from Germany, person who's trying to go and take over Ukraine. And it's fine to disagree with the invasion. It's fine to be opposed to this. It's fine to support Ukraine being independent. But when you have one of the nuclear powers making serious threats, and then, as you see today, admitting a nuclear war cannot be won, must never be fought, right? A total shift. You have to work with that person to make sure that nobody's country gets blown to smithereens. Um, when he says, the ministry, I should say, we are strongly convinced that in the current complicated and turbulent situation, blah, 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 the most immediate task is to avoid any military clash of nuclear powers. That doesn't sound like some madman region that's trying to destroy the planet. They are a, I guess I'll put it this way. Ukraine is proliferally in the right. Like, I side with them simply because they're the ones being invaded. Um, but if you can avoid having a nuclear conflict with Russia, you should pretty much do it under almost every single circumstance whatsoever. So I think Biden and the other members of this Big Five they were talking about, I guess the other three, I should say, any of these countries that are siding with Ukraine and have some actual pull and are like playing a major role in it, should sit down with Putin or some other Russian representative and say, hey, listen, um, we do not want a nuclear conflict under any circumstance. We will not threaten you with nuclear weapons so long as you don't threaten us with them. We have to let cooler heads prevail. Your invasion of Ukraine is something we do not support, but it is also something that we do not think should cause the end of the world. And if it comes down to where Russia says, hey, you know, we're either blowing up the world or you're going to get out of this conflict, the U.S. should get out of it. And that's one of the reasons why I don't like Americans' interventions in these different conflicts, because we wouldn't even be talking about the possibility of the U.S. being struck by nuclear weapons from Russia were it not for the decision of the U.S. government to get involved in Ukraine, because Putin wasn't targeting us. And you get all these stupid World War II comparisons, but you have to remember Ukraine and Russia have strong ties to each other. Putin has never shown any interest in invading or conquering these other regions. So this really was something where we decided to stick our nose in it, give a whole bunch of money to this country, and put Americans at risk for a conflict for a conflict in a region that most of us couldn't even find on a map if you put it in front of us. So I really hope this signals some kind of major course correction for all the countries involved. Zelensky needs to sit down, or Biden needs to sit him down, because he showed last year apparently that he can put his foot down, and tell him, hey, or excuse me, I think that was in June of this year. He told him at some in some previous points in this report that came out that, you're ungrateful. He should tell Zelensky, I am not going to risk world destruction to continue backing you in this conflict. So we will make a peace appeal with Putin, and if he tells us at like the ultimatum of, hey, you either get out of this or get blown up with them, or well, I don't think he's going to blow up Ukraine, excuse me, but you either have nuclear weapons sent to the U.S. or you stay out of this, we're pulling out. Like I'd love for someone to explain, why do Americans have to risk possibly getting vaporized for a conflict in a region that has nothing to do with us? And you can toe the line. You can say you condemn what Russia's doing, but you also don't want to provoke or be an instigator in a nuclear conflict, because then there are no winners. So all these different politicians talk about we stand with Ukraine, and we like, listen, all the patriotism is really nice for this other country that you never cared about before this year, but I'd actually like to see the U.S. make it out of this really unneeded and unnecessary intervention unscathed. So Democrats are. It's so funny how, like, both parties have the warmonger tendencies, and then because of like the cult of personality with their different politicians at the top, they get to champion, like, sticking their nose and stuff that has nothing to do with them, or just going to regions that have nothing to do with them, with this like heroism and we're for democracy and you shouldn't be able to go to this country. It's like, at some point that stuff has to stop. You have to be practical and say, this is not worth Americans getting destroyed over. So we'll see what happens. I hope cooler heads prevail.